'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where you are to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. As I sang that last word, I was thinking about Rebecca Schisler's beautiful teachings last week on joy and delight. And I'll share with you, we'll sing that again at the end of our sit or listen or whatever is working for you in terms of opening up to the message of this beautiful, beautiful Quaker melody. But it ties in with our double Torah portion that we are going to be reading this Shabbat. We've been studying and reading through the week in communities around the world, a double parsha that ends the book of Exodus. And we also have this Shabbat, it's the power-packed Shabbat. We also have the blessing for the new month of Nisan, which is going to begin the week after. So we always announce the blessing of that month to give us an opportunity to acknowledge the cycle of renewal that is offered to us through the moon. And certainly the announcement of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the beginning of the Jewish month of Nisan, is also ringing the bell of preparation for Passover, or intensifying that ring, as it were. So today I want to lift up a teaching from my colleague, Rabbi Gordon Tucker. And I recently learned, I was just sharing this with Mark, that Rabbi Tucker was a part of the clergy leadership program and what we call R3, which means the third iteration of the program for rabbis. Now the program is for cantors and rabbis together, but earlier on in the program, rabbis had their own cohort. And so he wrote a beautiful teaching on one of our parshiot, one of the Torah portions that we're going to read from for this Shabbat. And the title of his teaching is Simplicity and Hearing the Voice of God. So he's the one who put that Quaker melody and the Quaker text in my head this week from his teaching. So this wonderful teaching I'm going to share with you, kind of paraphrased in my own words, is from a wonderful new book that is called Torah Without End. And he was featured in this book in honor of Rabbi Jonathan Leider, a great teacher from IJS. This was a wonderful collection that was put together in honor of his retirement. I'm grateful to have contributed also. And Rabbi Tucker wrote the teaching and the practice on one of our parshiot today. So I think, Kat, thank you for putting this in the chat. So there'll be two things. You'll be able to, if you want to buy the book, which I highly recommend, which has writings on many of the parshiot in the Torah and also on different holidays and different prayers, it really comprehensive, brief, beautiful teachings. And then also, thank you to Mark and Kat for sharing the teaching of Rabbi Tucker's. You can read that at the end. I'm going to teach it in my own words, but you'll have that. So no worries to capture all this now. So Rabbi Tucker draws upon the words of the Ishbitzer Rabbi, Mordechai Yosef Leider, in his work known as the Mea HaShiloach, wonderful Hasidic teachings on the Torah and beyond. So in this teaching, he points out that the Torah tells us 8 times Moses carried out the instructions for setting up all of the furnishings for inside the Mishkan, God's holy dwelling place. This has been the focus of our Torah reading now for several weeks as we read about all the intricate details and everything that had to be set up. So 8 times Moses was instructed about this. And in the first 7 instances, God's telling Moses is always punctuated by the words that Moses did, quote, just as God had commanded Moses. So this detail is shared. Moses did it. just as God commanded Moses. And it goes on. That's 7 times, except for the 8th time that there's this description of Moses doing an important detail of the setting up of the Mishkan. In fact, it happens to be the last one is the setting up of the outermost enclosure of the dwelling place, the Mishkan. The mantra that has appeared at the end of each of those other 7 descriptions disappears. So Moses just completes the task, but we don't hear just as God commanded Moses. So the question, of course, is why? Why was this pattern interrupted? And the Ishbitzer Rebbe teaches us that as long as the Mishkan was not completed, Moses was able to hear God's voice as each task was completed, right? So Moses would do something and he would literally do that because he could hear the voice of God. Moses was able to hear God's voice because it rang throughout the wilderness, the space that was open. There was no completed enclosure where God's voice could be kind of trapped or confined. But when Moses completed the final steps in the anchoring of the courtyard hangings, as it were, the edifice of this Mishkan became complete, and God's voice was actually inside, completely inside. So Moses could recall God's voice instructing him in the previous iterations of the Mishkan, but he couldn't actually hear God's voice directly. So the idea that God's voice could be confined in the Mishkan in what Rabbi Tucker calls, and now I'm going to quote his teaching here, an elaborately constructed and highly restricted institution of worship, end quote, right? Just let that sink in for a minute. The Mishkan that we often think of as this holy place, a beautiful place where our ancestors could access the Shekhinah, the indwelling presence of God, this beautiful place. Rabbi Tucker is saying, you know what, maybe there's something about this that is so elaborate and that creates an institution of worship, right? There's a right way to do things. There's a wrong way to do things. There's an inside, there's an outside, right? And he's pointing out that this might be very different from what the original invitation was back in the 20th chapter of Exodus to make an altar of earth in any and every place, right? How did we get from being invited to make an altar of earth to creating structures that were maybe too elaborate and maybe too restrictive? And he goes on to teach, and here is a quote from Rabbi Tucker again. This observation, right, about our Torah reading and the Ishbitzer Rebbe's teaching warns us that as necessary as institutions may be for providing a locus for our religious needs, we should never lose sight of the fact that they always have the potential of distancing us rather than drawing us close. And so that's something that many of us in this meditation room have felt at different times. And he has a suggestion for a beautiful practice. This is a really nice feature of this book, that Torah Without End, is that after each one of the teachings, there's actually a practice. So he draws our attention to this Shaker song of simple gifts that I started our sit with today. And he says, consider the ways in which simplicity and thus greater immediacy, he says this is a modern equivalent to the altar of earth that's mentioned in Exodus chapter 20, can be reintroduced into our religious practices, right? How do we bring back simplicity and get back to that down, and we touch with our hands and feel the dirt, the raw substance of what makes up the earth, right? How do we get back to that connection in our lives. He says perhaps it can begin ritually with truly eating with simplicity on Pesach. That's a lovely thought as we are heading into this month of Nisan. How is it that the spiritual practice of Passover in our kitchens helps us emphasize our connection with the earth, with eating plant-based foods and eliminating things that we eat during the year? And I love this one, and dwelling in simplicity on Sukkot. What a beautiful time for us to hearken back to the festival of Sukkot in the fall, when the exposure to the elements brings us closer to that idea of the altar of earth. And so in our practice today, we want to bring in this idea of simplicity. And one of the best places we can start with this is our breath, right? Because the breath is available to us. And as elaborate as it is within the edifice of our bodies, it is also elegantly simple. It's our anchor. It's available to us to remind us that when we get caught in things that are elaborately constructed or overly ritualistic with a right way of doing things and a wrong way of doing things, that we can come back to our breath. Right? This is so much a focus of the practice last week with Rebecca, right, is to release what we perceive to be right and rigid, and to come into a more playful space, the place of the unknown, the place of simplicity. So as we find our seats, in whatever position you're in today, that your body needs to be in a place of dignity, a place of wakefulness while having compassion for the areas, the parts, the nooks and crannies of our bodies that might not be working as well as we might hope. They don't feel quite so elaborate today, maybe, but maybe more creaky, in need of compassion. And coming into our breath, into the simplicity of being breathed. Nothing to do, nothing to get rid of. And we'll sit together for about 10 minutes, and then I'll bring us back together with the strains of this Quaker melody once more. 'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where you are to be. And when you find yourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we shan't be ashamed to turn. Turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning we come down.
Thank you so much, Susan. Friends, let's seal the practice, this beautiful practice, as we always do, by offering an opportunity if you're in mourning or if you are observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish. We form a minyan to support those who are doing so, and you can put the name or names of those you're honoring in the chat box now or later. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, please stick around, stay present, and offer your support and love for those who are. And thanks to Kat for sharing the words of the mourner's Kaddish on the screen. And if you're reciting it, I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Yitkamev, Yalma, Divrach, Chayechon, Uvamechon, Chaye B'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, U'bizman, Karim, Amen. Ishmei Rabba V'Barach, Alam Ulamei Almaya, Barach V'Yishtabach, Ha'ar V'Yitam V'Yitnaseh, V'Yithadar V'Yitaled V'Yitalal Shemei V'Yishav Richu, La'elam Yifkol Birchata V'Shirata, Ushbechata V'Nechamata, Ha'amiran Ba'alma, True, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemayim, Chaim Aleinu V'Yalko Yisrael, Imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Mamam, Uyaseh Shalom,
Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol Yoshvei Tevel v'imru. Amen.
Amen. Everybody who lives here in the world.
Friends, thanks for joining us today. And I want to thank, of course, our teacher for today, Rabbi Susan Leider, for leading us again so beautifully. And just a reminder of what's coming up the rest of this week. Tomorrow, our dear friend, Rabbi Jordan Ben Datapel, will be here to lead us in practice. And on Wednesday, Rabbi Daniel Raphael Silverstein of Applied Jewish Spirituality. As I mentioned, I'll lead our sit on Thursday for our recovery sit, and Rebecca Schistler will be here to lead us into Shabbat on Friday. So really looking forward to a beautiful week of practice together. Of course, you're invited, as always, to stay on. You can use this time to continue to sit in the simplicity of that practice that Susan led us in so beautifully. Or if you'd like to share reflections on your experience, or if you want to ask a question or questions about the teaching, we'll try to respond to that. If it's a question, please put it in all caps in the chat. So Susan, let's invite you in. There you go. Thank you so much. Have, of course, associations with Aaron Copland, even though it's a Quaker melody, right? It's we have Aaron Copland, who incorporated into, I guess, Appalachian Spring. And also it has that kind of tshuva return quality at the end, which I really love. Thank you so much for sharing. You know, it was a beautiful teaching. It's a beautiful teaching, and really nice to bring Rabbi Gordon Tucker's teaching from that book. If you don't mind holding it up again, we'll just get another plug.
Sure.
It's worth, and Kat, if you have the link handy for it, highly recommend. Thank you. Right. We're all in sync beautifully today. So it's a really special book with very short chapters on each Torah portion and also on some of the central prayers of the prayer book and holidays written by students of Rabbi Jonathan Leider, all of which are based on a Hasidic text and take honoring, of course, Jonathan's legacy with IJS. So everyone should have that. And it brought my attention. I had never really thought about this, in Exodus 20, which is like, I guess, towards the end of the Parsha Yitro, which is the Parsha with the 10 Commandments. There's that little back and forth between the people and Moses where the people say, whoa, after the 10 Commandments, they say, whoa, that's enough for us. You get the rest of this, Moses. And Moses says, no, it's okay. You can do this. And they say, no, you do it. And then this is what follows, right? Right after that is this idea that God introduces this idea of make a mizbeach, an altar of Adamah, of earth, like you said, which the other thing that, earth, Adamah, which is related to Adam, human beings, that we are from Adamah, and we come from and return to the Adamah. Nothing more simple than that. So I guess here's the question for you, had to do with, I think it's just so helpful to point out how our tradition can make things very complicated, so complicated that many people feel really barred, right, from participating. It's just the language, the rituals, and also what you said, that you pointed out, the sense of, you got to do it right. If you don't do it right, then, and you took it back, stripped it down, and we even have in the Torah itself this idea of, all you really need is an altar of earth. What is the earth? The earth is you and your body. So my question really has to do with, how can we have, again, like, I was thinking for myself, this is just a reminder to come back to the body. So I wanted to ask you about that. Like, what do you think about that? It's just sort of like when we get caught up in our head and trying to do things right, whatever it might be, that the response is, there I go, complicating things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to take this opportunity to lift up another one of our great teachers, Cantor Lizzie Shamash. For those of you who are at yoga today, she did a heart opening practice, right? And reminded us that in the parshiot at the end, I don't remember the exact number because I was doing yoga, not taking notes, that the word lev is mentioned, I think, a big number of times. And so this was the invitation through the parsha today, right? Was to come back into our Mishkan is our body. So yes. And she's the teacher who taught me the most about that, just the most recently this morning. And boy, do we discover a lot when we go through that practice. Like what was living in my neck today, what was living in my upper back, which I've kind of known about, but once I actually physically to get down onto that mat and into my body, things start to connect about, that's been going on in your life. Yeah, that's what's right. And so I don't know, Mark, that's what comes to mind first, was the embodied practice from this morning.
Barb True is asking this question. It's a good one, I think, also about distinguishing. Well, I don't know if it's distinguishing, but Barb is asking, distinguishing between perfection required for the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and the desire for simplicity, which I don't know, Barb, if I'm getting that question right, but I guess I'm taking it as this invitation to, to work at it, right? The Mishkan, it doesn't mean ditch the Mishkan. There's something about the Mishkan and its complexity also, right? Which is significant, but then there's also the simplicity that doesn't require a Mishkan at all. So I don't know. Where does this leave us with the Mishkan if all we need is, that?
So one of the great things about our tradition, right, is we can look back and offer, I'm not going to use the word critique, but rather an observation, right? That, and I was thinking about this, or as things were flowing in and out of my heart and mind through the meditation, maybe the text should have left the Mishkan unfinished, right? Maybe this type of openness with the voice both being able to be of God, being able to be heard inside the Mishkan and outside the Mishkan would have been possible if the Mishkan had been left unfinished. And this, for me, connected back to a teaching, which Mark can riff on with me, is this idea that we leave the homes that we live in, we actually leave unfinished as a connection back to Jerusalem and the temple in Jerusalem. I'm sure that this can be drashed and explained or taught about in many different ways. But one idea is that's our source. Yerushalayim is our place of peace. And I don't mean physical makom or physical place here. I mean like psychically, spiritually, right? That it represents wholeness. And so by leaving our own homes where we live in unfinished, it's reminding us that the true edifice is shlemut, is wholeness. And so maybe what we want to think about is, imagining the Mishkan, even though the pshat, the direct meaning of the text says, yes, you did this and you did that there's probably some small place that was unfinished. And that's maybe how we want to approach the edifices in our lives, right? Our institutions that we're part of, right? When we walk in, how can we think, or when we come in virtually, how can we approach it as if it's unfinished and we have a role in that? So I want to thank Barb for lifting that up, because I was also kind of breathing that through the meditation also.
That is really beautiful, Susan. And in keeping also with, it's just in keeping with the basic idea in Judaism that kind of redemption is always over the horizon, that we never, there's an ambiguity about getting to the land, but like Sukkot, for example, which represents the culmination of the story of Passover, is leaving Egypt. Shavuot is getting the Torah, and Sukkot is arriving in the land. There's also this sense of the Sukkah represents not just, on the one hand, it represents being in land, on the other hand, it represents the wandering, and we're always perpetually, heading towards the land, as it were. So that because it addresses the question, I thought in the question was about, there's the complexity of the Mishkan, or the beauty of the Mishkan, but there's also the sense of perfectionism. And it's really about letting go of the perfectionism in some way, noticing the perfectionism, which leads to another question that Laura is asking about anxiety, which in many ways, I guess, is born of perfectionism often. And she's asking about, I'm not sure, but Laura, what your connection is that you were wanting to make with this particular teaching, but how do we meditate with anxiety? Or maybe we can turn around and say, like, when we notice anxiety, how does this teaching help us bring it back to something simple?
I don't know. I keep going back to Rabbi Nancy Flam's teaching, which I mentioned briefly today, nothing to get and nothing to get rid of. And so some of the most powerful observations that I've taken in about anxiety is that it's not about getting rid of it from our bodies, but it's about being with it, surfing it, instead of creating more anxiety by thinking that we're going to get rid of this. I need to get to that place where I'm not going to feel anxiety, where I'm going to be better. I'm going to be more perfect. So for me, that mantra of there's nothing to get, nothing to get rid of, nothing to get, nothing to get rid of. I found that to be a really powerful teaching.
With you on that. Andrew is writing, simplicity feels to me, I don't know if this is a typo, but I think I'm taking it as simplicity means, maybe it does mean simplicity is the fruit of going in versus the complexity of building out, which is really interesting to think about the Mishkan as this kind of building out and connecting with others. The simplicity, it can be just, investigating the truth of our own experience or just being with what is, like you were describing it, right? Oh, anxiety arising, right? But not being attached or caught up in it. Like you said, surfing it, right? Like allowing it to be present without getting caught in it in some way.
So
Go ahead, Susan.
no, just the reminder that going inward into simplicity does help us prepare to go eventually outward from our complex tasks, interactions, creations, right? It's not to stay inside forever, but going back to the simplicity actually helps us move out into the world and take action.
Beautiful. And maybe we end with this, actually, that is, when I hear you say that, I think, yeah, it really is simple, isn't it? But we make it so complicated. We get caught in our complexities, and it's just so helpful to be reminded that the instructions actually can be quite simple. Just looking to see if there are any other questions before. Oh, thanks. Sarah Nesson is you want to bring attention to Sarah, who's a regular here, who has a show called Broken Mishkan. So that's really right on point with what you're saying, Susan, about the idea of a broken Mishkan. And even actually, it's funny because think about next, not this coming Shabbat, but the following Shabbat, when we start the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, we have that small aleph in it, in the word Vayikra. And then later in Deuteronomy, a Vav in Shalom, in the story of Pinchas, which is a broken Vav. So there is kind of this kind of brokenness or irregularity that runs throughout that kind of reminds us, not to mention the broken tablets, which are in the ark alongside the intact tablets, right? So thank you so much for inviting us into this really beautiful practice today, Susan, as always. And so grateful to you for not just, your offerings when you're leading, but also, you're just like, such a valued and it's just so powerful to see and experience your connection in all aspects of what we're offering, like to bring in the connection with the yoga today. Thank you for that. And for all you do for us. I'm very grateful.
Right back at you, Mark.
Okay. All right. And thanks to Kat. Thanks to each of you for being here. Hope you'll join us tomorrow. Rabbi Jordan Ben-Appel will join us. Jordan, by the way, will mention, but he's got a new venture called Ramah Beyond. I don't know if you know that, Susan. National Ramah for immersive experiences for Jewish adults and families. So very excited about that, and also about an IJS partnership with Ramah Beyond, which gives us an opportunity to partner with Jordan, who, of course, is a faculty member at IJS for a long time and a very central person in IJS's work. So really nice and delighted to have him tomorrow. Okay, thanks so much, Susan. Many blessings, everyone. Hope to see you tomorrow or sometime soon.
Bye, everybody.